Today on Whiskey Bravo Adventures, we'll be installing the BodyArmor 4x4 spare tire swing, their part number 5298. So I don't really do unboxing videos, but just to show you what's in the box for the BodyArmor tire carrier. There's the arm, the main arm bubble wrap. There's a box of parts for the install, and then that is the plate that is going to go on the back of the tailgate. Not super impressed with how it was packaged. This plate looks like it has a little rip in this is like felt or rubber pad of some kind, and it looks like it has a little tear in it right there. This is pretty much how it looked when I lifted up the main swing arm. This is just kind of laying in there. It's not really secured, so yeah, not super happy with the packaging, but we'll see. You know, it is what it is. And then just taking another closer look at this, it's actually got a pretty good gouge or scratch through the paint and this tear. So I would say, and here's some bad scratching. This looks like it's powder coated, so that's a pretty big issue rust wise. Probably gonna have to hit that with some black spray paint just so it doesn't rust. But yeah, I mean, they definitely need to do a better job packaging this thing. I understand that it's heavy, but this is a little ridiculous actually, I think, nowadays. So just taking a look at what was in the box, there's the plate that goes on the tailgate. That looks like the rear camera plate. Not sure what those are. Probably something to do with hinges. The actual tire carrier, the cover for the camera, the spindle that the arm rides on, the bearings, pack of hardware. This was all loose inside the box, so I have no idea. Washer, 2 large bolts, a small hex head button screw, and a lock washer. Those were just loose in the box, so not sure. And then yeah, a couple little Allen wrenches. And then there is the main arm. It's fairly heavy. I think I'm going to weigh it just out of curiosity. I'm going to bring the scale down and weigh it just to see what it weighs. So I just want to go ahead and weigh the swing arm real quick. I'm going to zero out the scale and then put the swing arm itself on the scale. And just the swing arm by itself is coming in at 47 pounds. So yeah, it's a pretty beefy steel. It's not thin, that's for sure. So yeah, I was just curious about the weight. 47 pounds for just the swing arm. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the cap that was covering the hole on the bumper. And basically that's where the spindle for the tire rack is going to bolt into. There's already a plate inside the bumper for that spindle to bolt onto. So I've just basically removed the cover. The next thing I need to do is remove the plastic trim molding that's on the inside of the tailgate so I can get to the wiring for the third brake light. And as you can see, like most cars now, everything's held on with little plastic body clips. So I'm just carefully separating that trim piece from the actual tailgate itself. And there you go. The trim piece is removed from the inside of the tailgate. It's just plastic body clips that hold it on. So we'll go ahead and look at the next step. So the next step was to remove the wiring that goes out to the rear camera and third brake light. And that would be these 2 wires here. This is a camera feed, and then this is the actual brake light. And then after disconnecting the wiring, I just basically pulled the grommet gently through the opening. Came out pretty easy, so not a big deal. Next step is going to be removing the actual tire carrier. So the next thing we're doing is we're removing the bolts. There's 6 bolts, actually 8. There's 8 bolts that hold the spare tire carrier on. So there's 4 across the top and 4 across the bottom. We got all of them out except for one, so I'm just going to finish that one up and then we'll be able to get the spare tire carrier off the tailgate. And there's the removed original Mopar spare tire carrier. It's not very heavy, probably only about maybe 8 or 10 pounds at most. So you don't have to worry about it being real heavy when you take it off. And this is now the exposed back portion of the tailgate. So we're on to the next step. So the next step is to remove the left shutter assembly. So we'll be working on that next. And here's the shutter assembly. You can see there's just tabs at the top and at the bottom. So all I had to do was push down on those tabs and then push it outward from the inside out through the tailgate to remove it. So pretty easy. So the next step is going to be to install the replacement or the bracket for the tailgate that comes with the BodyArmor kit. We'll be installing this onto the back of the tailgate where the camera was and the spare tire carrier was, using the same factory bolts that held on the spare tire carrier. So I have the new plate loosely connected to the tailgate using all the factory bolts. So I have them all turned in by hand now. There's a little bit of movement in here, so you can adjust it if you need to. So I'm just going to be tightening those bolts and we'll go on to the next step. So there we have the tailgate plate mounted. One thing that I noticed is the opening for the passenger side vent. It's actually pretty tight, so you got to be careful when you're putting the plate on that you're not pinching or catching the upper portion of the vent. So the next thing we're going to look at is this turnbuckle. I call it a turnbuckle, but the important thing to know about this is basically going to bolt on to this plate, and then the other end of it will bolt on to the actual tire carrier arm itself. And you need to be able to adjust this to give you the right spacing. So what's important to know about this piece here is that you have a left hand and right hand, or left hand thread, right hand thread. And what that means is, normally when you're screwing a bolt in, you turn it to the right or clockwise to screw it in. But on a left-handed thread, when you turn it to the right, you're actually unscrewing it. So it's kind of like a reverse thread. So you just need to make sure that you understand that when you're looking at the end of the bolt, or in this case the eye, if you turn it clockwise, if you're holding it out in front of you, if you turn this clockwise, that's a right-hand thread. If you turn it clockwise and it tightens, or the distance becomes shorter between this nut and the eye itself, if you turn it to the right and that distance shortens, it's a right-hand thread. So I'm turning it clockwise and it's getting tighter. If I rotate it counterclockwise, you can see the spacing is more now. So this is a right-hand thread, but the other side of this, the other side, is a left-hand thread. So the instructions say to run the jam nut, which is this nut right here, all the way on to the eye bolt on the right-hand thread. So that's what I did. And then the other thing that it says is to basically turn both these eyes into the center turnbuckle an equal amount. So it's pretty much what we're gonna do. But again, it's very important that you make sure you understand there's a right-hand thread and a left-hand thread on this turnbuckle device. So the next thing we're doing is we're gonna be using these spacers on the bracket that's on the tailgate to space the eye bolt. And then we're just gonna run a bolt down through there. And regarding these spacers, you'll see that one side has a taper and the other side is kind of flat. And basically the flat side is going to go inside and up against the bracket itself, so that the tapered side is toward the center, and that's where the eye bolt is going to reside, is in between these two spacers. So from the hardware kit, we're going to be using one of the large bolts, two of the large washers, and one of the large nylon locking nuts. And there you can see it's just loosely connected now, but you have the large nut, large bolt, large washer, spacer with the taper facing toward the center, the other spacer with the taper facing toward the center, a washer, and the nylon locker. And we're just going to go ahead and snug that up now. And there you go. In case you're wondering, it's a 18mm bolt with a 19mm nut. And I just snugged that up. It's got a locking washer, so you don't have to worry about Loctite or anything like that. It doesn't really need to be like super tight, so I'm not worried about torquing it or anything like that. And it's just tight. It's snug with a little extra, basically. So the next step is to install these bump stops on the tailgate bracket. There's going to be one up here and one down here. Now the first thing I'm noticing is, as I had stated when I was doing my unboxing, it seemed like there was some loose hardware, nuts and bolts inside the box. So what I'm noticing is these are 4 of the screws for these spacers or bump stops, but there's only 3 lock washers, and I can only find 3 flat washers. So I'm gonna have to scrounge around my spare parts and see if I can find another lock washer and flat washer. And there's the first bump stop installed. And again, it's just snugged up right now, and then we're gonna go ahead and install the bottom one now. So this is where the bottom bump stop is supposed to go. And when I was trying to attach it, I was having some issues with this one bolt threading in. And I actually couldn't get it to thread. I actually had to get a tap, and actually a 6mm tap, and tap that back out. Now that could just be, it could just be some powder coating that got in there and kind of messed up the threads a little bit. So I just had to chase those threads a little bit, and should be fine now. The bolt seems to be going in, so I'm going to go ahead and get that lower bump stop mounted. Okay, and there we go. The lower bump stop is attached. After chasing the threads with the 6mm tap, that bolt went in just fine. It's actually not uncommon on anything that's painted or powder coated to sometimes have to clean up threads. So no big deal. Just helps to have the right tools handy, that's all. So the next step is actually to install this spindle up inside the bumper. And according to the instructions, we're supposed to be using 4 of these bolts, 4 of these flat washers, 4 of these lock washers. I guess they're invisible because they're not in the kit. And yeah, we're supposed to bolt it up in there. And just doing like a test fit, I'm having the same issue with these bolts. These bolts are not going into the spindle very well. And I don't know if you can see real close in there, but it looks like there's a fair amount of paint and or powder coating on those threads. So I'm gonna have to do the same thing with this spindle before I actually install it. First I'm gonna have to look for some lock washers because they're not in the kit. And the second thing I'm gonna have to do is chase these threads before I try to bolt those in, because I have a feeling it's just gonna strip out. So I'm gonna go try to take care of that, and I'll get back to you. So just to give you a better idea of what's going on, this is the spindle for the spare tire arm. And the issue is that the threads, these bolts are not threading in very well. They're really tight. They're kind of hard to start. And from my experience, The issue is that the inside threads are actually, they either have some powder coating or they have some paint on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 12mm tap, and I'm just going to try to carefully get the tap started. And then once the tap is started, I'm just going to real slowly work this through the threads and try to clean out those threads, try to get some of that paint or powder coating out of there. And again, I'm going to take my time with this because I want to make sure that I don't strip it. So I actually did a few turns, and you can see that the threads are a little bit more shiny now, and there's actually some metal there. So I just want to take the bolt and I want to try to run the bolt through, and yeah, I can tell already that the bolt is going into the threads a lot easier now. So I'm just going to finish this up on all four, and then we'll finish up. So I've been chasing these threads with the 12mm tap, and I just want to kind of go over it again. In this one right here, you can see that it's fairly dark. It's hard to see the actual threads because of the threads are actually covered in either paint or powder coating, whatever this is. I can't really tell. And then after chasing the thread here, you can see it's shiny now. The threads are shiny. So basically that's the issue. The ones that are not shiny, the bolt only goes in a little bit and then it kind of doesn't want to thread anymore, and that's just because the threads are covered in some type of material, whether it be paint or powder coating, and it's just making the bolt not want to thread very easily. So all I'm doing again is using a 12mm tap to just go ahead and run it through these, and all it does is it removes the paint or powder coating, whatever's on the threads, and then that allows the bolt to just turn in easily like it should. So could I have forced them in? Yeah, I probably could have forced them in, but it's just really not the right way to do things. So I just went ahead and cleaned them up. So we'll be finishing up this last one, and then we'll get this thing bolted on. So I went and got some lock washers and some other missing hardware from a local nut and bolt supplier. So we're gonna go ahead and install a spindle. I have it sitting in there right now. There's 2 bolts that are just finger tight. We're gonna go ahead and run these other 2 in and then just snug it up. So the spindle's installed now. The instructions say to just snug up the bolts and leave them, like don't tighten them all the way because you might need to do some adjustment. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the bearings in the actual swing arm, and then we should be able to get the swing arm up onto the spindle. And here is one of the bearings, and you'll see that they're not packed, so we're gonna have to go ahead and pack these bearings with grease before we put them in. Okay, so there are the bearings. I went ahead and packed them with just all-purpose grease. So the next thing we're gonna do is drop them into the swing arm. Okay, so that's the bearing race for the bottom of the swing arm. And that one was a little snug. I had to tap it in very carefully. And that's seated now. So all I have to do is put the, I'm gonna put the bearing over the spindle, and then I will put the swing arm onto the spindle and let it sit onto the bearing. The race for the upper bearing was actually, it went on real easy, just kind of dropped in, so I didn't have to really do anything with that one. But yeah, that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna put the bearing on, the lower bearing on, and then we'll put the swing arm on, and then we'll follow it up with the upper bearing. Okay, so I have the swing arm on, and I have the castle nut just sitting on top. It's just on by a couple threads. Then what I did was I'm using a can to support the swing arm to take some of the weight off of the swing arm and to allow me to get these bearings lined up before I start hand tightening that castle nut. So I have the swing arm on the spindle and everything is still pretty loose. It's just snugged up, so there's a lot of adjustment play in the entire swing arm and spindle because nothing's tightened down yet. And what I'm doing is I'm using a can to support the swing arm, and I have a level on the top of the swing arm so that I can see how close I am to level. I checked the level on the bumper and it was pretty level. It's on, you know, it's on a pretty level floor right now, so the Jeep is level left to right. So once I saw that the Jeep was level according to the bumper left to right, I just put the level up on top of the swing arm, and as you can see, it's pretty close to being spot on. So now that I know that everything's level, I can just go ahead and tighten the 4 bolts on the spindle and then just recheck the castle nut. Okay, so the spindle bolts are tightened down now. There was no torque spec given in the instructions, so they're tight. That's how tight they are, they're tight. And I'm just gonna basically check the swing, and it seems to operate without any kind of binding or anything like that. It's very smooth. It's coming back pretty much on the level. It's just a little bit off, but I'm kind of okay with that. It's real close. So yeah, it looks good. I'm checking the bump stops. There's definitely enough clearance right now. So the next step is going to be to go ahead and actually attach the eye bolts. I call it a turnbuckle with eye bolts. Got to put that back on, and then yeah, and we'll move on to the actual tire mounting bracket. So we have the turnbuckle attached to the plate on the back of the tailgate. And one of the things that they want you to do is they want you to make sure that the spacing between both eyes and the actual center nut section are about the same. So we're going to look at this. It's about 13 millimeters. And we'll check this side. And we got about the same, about 13 millimeters. So the reason why that is when you turn this turnbuckle, that's how you're going to adjust the swing arm to be either closer or further away from the backer plate here. So you want to have the same amount of distance on each eye screw so that you have the most amount of adjustment. You don't want one of them bottoming out and then the other one being, you know, completely extended. So yeah, you need to make sure the space between both of the eyes and the center barrel nut are about the same. So we got that done. We're just going to go ahead and run the bolt through the actual tire carrier now. Okay, so we have the turnbuckle installed with both the bolts on the backer plate and on the swing arm. And now you can see as we adjust this, it's going to move. It's hard to see, but it's basically going to move the swing arm either in or out until we get it to the right spot. Now, just going to leave that loose right now, but this is going to be how you adjust the distance of the arm against the bump stops. But if we go ahead and open it, you can see that the turnbuckle just keeps the swing arm separated from the tailgate and allows the swing arm to operate in conjunction with the tailgate itself. Okay, so we have the adjuster on bolted to both the tailgate plate and the swing arm, and you can see there's a little bit of play here. So this is where you use the adjuster, and I'm just rotating it. I'm actually tightening it and just getting rid of that play. You can see there's no more play. It's snug. It's not like overly tight. Like I could still turn this by hand if I wanted to, but it is snug. So I'm going to go ahead and use the jam nuts. These are called jam nuts because these nuts are going to tighten up against the barrel nut in the center. Probably going to use a little bit of blue Loctite. I don't want to use red because I might need to adjust it, but I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite right here on the threads right here and on the threads right here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and tighten up these jam nuts. Okay, and now we have everything snugged up here. The jam nuts are snugged up against the barrel nut, relatively equal spacing between the two eyes, and the eyes are relatively in line with each other. You don't have one that's canted up and the other one canted down or anything like that. So And there's no movement. It's nice and snug against the back plates. So everything looks pretty good with that. So the next thing is going to be to install the actual tire carrier bracket. So I have these bolts snugged up a little bit on the actual spare tire carrier, but it's loose enough that I can move it forward and back. So what I need to do now is I need to go over to my wheel and tire, and I need to measure the distance from the inside of the wheel where it would bolt onto the axle, the distance from there to the actual outside edge of where the tire would be, so I can get an approximate distance for this. So it's going to be easier if I measure that on the wheel and get this in pretty much right where it needs to be before I actually put the tire on and everything like that. So we're going to do that next. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I have a level that is across the inside of the tire, so I can get a measurement from the inside face of the wheel to where the edge of the tire is, so I can properly adjust the spare tire rack. So I'm just going to measure from the inside face of the wheel out to where the surface of the tire is, and we have about 150 millimeters, or just about 6 inches. It's about 5 7/8 inches. So now I know how far I need to space out the actual spare tire bracket over on the swing arm. So we're back at the swing arm now, and you can see this is the plate where the inside surface of the wheel is going to be up against, and then the tire is going to be up against the actual swing arm itself. So we need to kind of take a measurement. I'm going to come over to this side so the tape's right. So I'm going to take a measurement from the outside edge of the swing arm to the outer face, and you can see it's out too far. We're almost at like 6 3/4 now. So I just need to adjust that in to about 5 7/8 or 150 millimeters. And then the tire and wheel should fit on just fine. So you need to remember that there's 2 additional plates right here. So when you're measuring the distance from where the inside of the wheel face is going to be touching the spare tire bracket, you need to measure from the outside of this final plate to the outside edge of the main tire carrier arm, and then that's going to be where you want to go to your, for me it was about 150 millimeters. So we look like, it's hard to see on camera, it actually looks like we're right at 150. It's a weird angle depending on how you hold the camera, but we're right at 150 millimeters. So I'm just gonna verify it on both sides as close as I can, basically. And then we're just going to go ahead and snug those up, tighten those up, and that'll be done. So we need to remove the backup camera from the original tire mount. So I'll be loosening these torque screws here, and then taking there's an assembly inside there that's going to drop out. So I'm going to loosen those up and get that out. And we also need to separate the actual third brake light from the assembly. So we're going to be removing all the torque screws and then getting to that. And now with the camera assembly removed from the spare tire mount, we actually need to go ahead and remove those 3 torque screws right there to actually free the camera from the mount. So now we need to install the backup camera to the new BodyArmor mount. And we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so I ended up doing a lot of this off camera, but there is the rear security camera, or the rear backup camera mounted to the BodyArmor camera mount. Again, there were no screws or nuts or bolts for the camera included with the kit. I think there's some hardware missing from the tire swing kit that I got. I already reached out to BodyArmor, so I'm waiting to see what they have to say about that. And this bracket was actually bent pretty good during shipping, so I first had to straighten the bracket out to the correct angle. The camera wouldn't even fit in until I straightened the bracket out and did a little filing, and then finally got the camera to fit in. But then I just so happened to have some nylon locker nuts and some bolts that would work for the camera. So yeah, let's just try to get through this build. And this doesn't come with the kit, but this is just some wire loom that I'm going to use, plastic wire loom split. It's actually split so you can get the wire into it. I'm just going to use that to protect the wiring for the brake light and the camera. So the next thing I did was I loosely attached the third brake light bracket to the arm. And again, it was missing some hardware, so that's why these are silver instead of black, because I basically had to go out and buy lock washers and flat washers for these bolts because there's some fasteners missing from my install kit. And then this needs to be adjusted. Again, I'll have to measure where this needs to go. But before I do that, or before I can get the brake light working, I realize that these wires are going to have to be extended. This is the original wiring harness, so yeah, this is where it ends, and that's where the brake light is at its lowest point. So just going to have to figure out where that brake light's going to sit, and then we'll go ahead and take this wire protector off, and we'll have to lengthen this wire. No big deal. So that's pretty much it on the BodyArmor 4x4 spare tire swing arm kit. It's pretty much fully installed now. I'm really happy with the thickness of the metal. The only thing that I wasn't happy with was the way it was packed and the fact that it was missing hardware. So I'm still gonna wait and see if BodyArmor responds to my contact regarding the missing hardware and see what their actual response is. And I'll probably either comment or make another video just to give them a chance to make this right. But yeah, basically I'm out about $22 on hardware. But like I said, I couldn't be waiting around for them to get back to me. So anyway, that's the pretty much the finished mounting. All I need to do is get that spare tire up on there and bolt it on, and it's going to be done. So it's probably going to wrap it up for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the install. I usually don't do install videos, but figured out what the heck, you know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Talk to you later. So I just wanted to do some follow-up on the BodyArmor tire swing, tire carrier, spare tire carrier. I did have an issue where the kit that I got was missing hardware. I did reach out to BodyArmor and heard back from them within about a day, maybe a day and a half. That's when I got my initial email from BodyArmor stating that they have my inquiry, and they asked a few more questions about it, and I replied back. And then I believe it was the next day after that, I actually got a phone call from a rep at BodyArmor, just advising what the status was. And great guy, I don't recall his name right now, but he was really helpful and very responsible. He was interested in what was missing and seemed interested in hearing what I had to say about the packaging and how, you know, I think it's a really good product, but the packaging was just really not good. He explained that because I didn't order it directly from BodyArmor, that there may have been some type of like a third party issue with the packaging, and I don't know, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't, but either way, they took care of it. They sent me a complete hardware kit FedExed it. It seemed like it came FedEx overnight, tell you the truth, or next day, which I was really surprised about, because that's shipping's just a fortune right now. So to send me a whole body or a whole hardware kit overnight FedEx or next day FedEx, that was really cool. So yeah, kudos to BodyArmor. They took care of it. They were great to work with. And they seemed to want to hear what I had to say about the shipping, and said that they were going to look into it and make sure that certain people were made aware. Now, the only issue I've been having is there are 4 bolts that hold the spindle. The spindle is under here, and there's 4 bolts that hold that spindle onto the inside structure of the bumper. And what's been happening is the whole tire carrier has been, when I drive it, it seems like it's been shifting down. No matter how tight I make those bolts, it just does not seem to want to hold the tire up at the right angle. So what I ended up doing is I ended up actually running some weld inside where the spindle is. So let me see if I can get some shots of that real quick. Hold on. So this is a look at the spindle inside the rear bumper, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but you can definitely see there's some weld in there. I ground down, I actually used a file to get the powder coating off of that part of the bumper, and then ran some weld down, welding that portion of the spindle onto the actual bumper. I am not an expert welder, as you can see, but it was really hard to get in there too. There's not a lot of room to get in there. So right now, it seems to have resolved the issue with the tire carrier dropping down. So right now, I'm just kind of watching those welds to see if they crack. So regarding the tire carrier dropping down, like I said, I ran a couple welds along the one side of the spindle, and so far it seems to have been working, or it seems to be working. I think the paint that they use on the spindle and the powder coating, I think it's just creating a lot of lack of tension or friction between the two surfaces, the spindle and the bumper itself. And I think no matter how tight you get those bolts, because of the way the tire arm is designed, it's just a big lever. So it doesn't take a lot of weight on the end of that tire arm to cause the arm to pivot. And again, it didn't seem to matter how tight I got those bolts that hold the spindle on, it still seemed to want to drop down until I ran some weld on it. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's another answer that I'm not aware of, but that's the only issue that I ran into. I still really like the tire carrier. Good quality metal. It's real thick metal. Powder coating is really nice on it. So yeah, I'm still happy with it. It's, part of Jeeping is a lot of times is just figuring stuff out, whether it's figuring out the trail or figuring out how to do something better on the Jeep itself hardware wise. So I don't have any issues with it. Is it the best design? I don't know. I don't have that much experience. I like it though. It works. It came, it was fitted for the bumper that I got, and I like the bumper. I'm real happy with the bumper. It's a good quality bumper as well. The metal, the steel is relatively thick compared to some of the other stuff that was on the market. So either way, yeah, that's going to wrap it up for the BodyArmor tire swing, tire mount, whatever you want to call it. And I'm satisfied with it. I like it. Just need to keep an eye on the welds. If it does start dropping down again, I'll probably just go in there and try to get more a little bit more weld on the lower portion of the spindle. But we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching.